Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining the latest Boutique Hotel News webinar. Today's topic is called Using Guest Intelligence to Drive Spend. A very timely conversation. I know a lot of you are eager to learn more, so we will shortly meet our panelists. But before we do, I'm just going to share a few words about myself. If we can go on to the next slide, please. My name's Eloise Hanson, and I'm the editor of Boutique Hotel News. We are an online trade publication covering the global boutique, lifestyle, and luxury hotel industry, including branded residences. So today's sponsor is Agilysys, an all-in-one hospitality solutions provider. We do have a short video to play for you today. Fingers crossed we have our audio working. So we will share the Agilysys video for you after today's webinar. It's a fantastic new product feature that the team have launched. We do have Frank on the call today, who I'm sure will be sharing much more information about this new tool shortly. But before we get to that point, I'm just going to share a very brief overview of how today's webinar is going to run. We'll spend around 45 minutes with our panelists today, followed by some time at the end to take any questions from the audience. So if you do have any questions, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screens. We will get round to asking those as and when relevant. And we will be keeping this webinar open right at the end, just to allow our audience members time to follow up on any of the links that we have popped into the chat. When the webinar closes, we kindly ask that you complete a very short 5-minute survey. It's just to gauge some feedback. We're always looking to improve, to make these sessions as interactive as possible. So any contributions there would be greatly valued. So before we meet our panelists, I always like to provide some context as to why we are here today. And here is a screenshot taken from Deloitte's 2025 Travel Industry Outlook. I must flag here that this is based on the results of a survey from US travelers. And the graph highlights traveler expectations for automation across different stages of the guest journey. And I'm saying this now because automation is a topic that we're going to cover later on today. So when it comes to check-in, it is largely preferred to have a predominantly or only human experience. That figure hasn't really changed much in the last 5 years. So it's around 46% as of 2024. So that's a 1% increase in a predominantly or only digital check-in experience in the last 5 years, which is now about 24%. And admittedly, I was expecting this figure to be a little bit higher than that 24%. For room service, travellers are nearly evenly divided among preferring a fully digital experience, a mix of digital and human interaction, or a completely human approach. And when it comes to local recommendations, however, the slight front runner by about 1% is a blended digital and human experience. Some key takeaways on the right-hand side here. While automation has the potential to save travelers time or enable more fun and comfort, most still expect the human touch along their journeys. The technology is only as good as the data it has to work with. On the next slide, another graph taken from the same survey will be very relevant for today's conversation. If we can move to the next slide, please, team. This graph is looking at what attributes or amenities that most appeal to hotel guests. So, for instance, around 1/4 of US travelers, so about 26%, would enjoy a free drink at the bar on their next hotel stay. And when you compare those attribute or amenity preferences to the importance of price, price, deals, and discounts were most important when applied to on-property dining. Again, I'll just share some takeaways from this section of the report. When developing and timing upsell offers, the nature of the trip and the history of the individual traveller could unlock more than simple demographic tendencies can. Differences among respondents appear sharper when using a trip type lens. So that's international trips, family trips, or trips blending work and travel. So I hope that's given you all something to think about as we move on to meet our panelists. So I'm going to ask each to introduce themselves from left to right as per the PowerPoint slide. So Frank, let's kick off with yourself and welcome.
Thank you, Eloise. It's a pleasure. And my name is Frank Pitsikalis. I'm a Senior Vice President of Product Strategy for Hotels with Agilysys. Hi, everyone.
Thank you, Frank. And Dado, over to you next.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Eloise. And hi, everyone. So I'm Dado, and I'm a Group Director of Digital Customer Experience at Sircle Collection.
Super, Dado. And Christopher, over to you. Welcome.
Thanks, Eloise, and welcome, everybody. My name is Christopher Kenny. I'm Chief Marketing and Communications Officer with the Great National Group. We manage the Great National Hotel and Classic British Hotel brands across the UK and Ireland.
Super. Thank you, Christopher. Now, all the LinkedIn profiles have been popped into the chat. I do encourage you to connect with our speakers today. We've got a lot to get through. We may not quite get through it all. We'll do our very best. So yeah, do take the time and follow up after today's session has ended. My first question is going to actually come to all of you, and I'll start with Christopher first, seeing as you went last in the introductions. How would you define guest intelligence today?
How would I define? For me, it is looking at not just what we know about the guests in the past, but what we can discern about their future habits, not just individually, but looking at their market segments and making inferences on that. It's definitely grown in the last couple of years, and it's definitely something that is becoming more front and center for hotels.
I'm going to work backwards. Dado, how would you define guest intelligence?
Well, for me today, the guest intelligence goes beyond like who booked the room. It's also understanding like why they are staying and what they value as well. For example, if you have someone staying in a room, but let's say, and you see in a system it's occupied, but you actually want to know who is in there. It's a couple, for example, who is celebrating anniversary, and then maybe they order champagne. So for me, the guest intelligence is really kind of connecting the dots and really using these kind of data, which will turn the insights into really kind of valuable information. And then that valuable information can kind of, with personalized action, can elevate and the spend and general loyalty for the brand.
We're all similar but different angles so far, and gathering that this was not a pre-planned answer, so I'm great that we're all tapping at this from different perspectives. Frank, what are your thoughts? What do you see as guest intelligence?
I believe, I mean, it's really about having a 360-degree view of the guest. And we recently launched what we call Intelligent Guest Profile. And that's about tracking their spend patterns, right? And it's not just in each silo of the business, in rooms or in spa or food and beverage, but it's looking at all of that spend holistically. We were tracking it in each individual area, but now with intelligent guest profile, it brings it centrally. So no matter where you are, you know what this guest has spent in each area. You know what types of products and services they value. So do they prefer a massage versus a high value facial? They like red wine, either an Amarone or Chianti. What's their loyalty status? All of these things are important when you're looking at a guest and trying to personalize their experience. What are their preferences? Are they vegetarian? Do they prefer, deep massage pressure? They like their room sort of low floor but away from the elevator. I mean, all of these things play into really personalizing a guest experience and being able to really market to them one-to-one, right? What is their itinerary? What have they booked or haven't booked yet? And so how can we promote things? And then really looking at their spend patterns, right? What is their market segment, but also looking at, are they traveling? They might have a different propensity to buy when they're traveling on business versus with their spouse or their partner, or traveling, with their family. And so looking at each of those, is an important attribute. And then finally, what are the other related profiles to them, right? So not taking this room-centric view of the world, but more guest-centric, and seeing, who are their family members, who are their golf buddy groups, what company or associations have they maybe come to the hotel as part of a conference with, right? So all of these things really starts to build this 360-degree view of the guest. And really, as we enter the AI age, that those are going to be critically important to be able to use that information in a way that truly personalizes their experience at scale.
I think that with the early use cases of AI, that's definitely becoming easier. And I think, to Christopher's point, eventually we'll be able to get to where we can forecast, predict, anticipate what that guest will, where they'll stay, what they'll spend on, so that we can capture that all important revenue that could perhaps otherwise be left on the table. I want to talk now about behavioural trends, because at the end of the day, this is what we're looking to, I suppose, not maximise, but better capture. So I'm going to come to I'll come to Dado first from an operational perspective. What behavioural trends are you seeing amongst guests that's driving the need for that deeper intelligence?
Well, guest behavior is shifting fast. So I mean, COVID had a huge impact, but in general, like the whole development and involvement in digital within our regular lives is kind of increasing with the day. So people are also nowadays booking much closer to the arrival, and yet they are still expecting this kind of hyper personalized experience from every single hotel, let's say within our group, for example. They're also making, besides the kind of the regular choices they make, obviously the price and location, etc. They're also kind of making the choices based and on sustainability, authenticity, and so on. And that kind of expectations, there was a huge shift, at least what we are noticing when we are using it definitely heavily within our group, is the shift which came actually from retail, where people kind of have set up different kind of expectations, and they are now getting more and more applied within our hospitality too. So to kind of act on it, I believe that hotels, same like how we are doing it as well, they need to take kind of deeper intelligence and really understand what they are having, so they can respond in a real time. Especially, as I said, nowadays the impact on kind of retail is becoming bigger and bigger. So people are having these kind of expectations, and people need to anticipate super fast on it. Otherwise, the train is kind of gone.
I also think that, as much as I enjoy the idea that we need as much information as possible in order to make the right decision, I think that in some cases we can become overwhelmed by the amount of choices and options that are out there. But as long as that's leading to an informed decision, yes, I would totally agree. Christopher, what are you seeing across the portfolio? How are guest behaviors shifting, and how is that leading to a need for a richer guest profile?
Yeah, I mean, to echo what Frank and Dado said, like the behavior, but the behavior shift isn't just about wanting personalization, and which they do because they've been trained to that from the likes of Amazon and Netflix and Spotify. It's about wanting that personalization with boundaries. Like we're finding that people will give you the data and we can get data on them, but it's not. There's a very fine line between us, having too much data or over mining it. And we definitely see it that the guest intelligence, it's not just a data mining exercise, but it's also a trust building exercise. So it's about anticipating needs, but also respecting that privacy and delivering experiences that feel tailored without ever feeling invasive. And that's the balance that we're trying to come at the moment, because we have access to a lot of data now, and particularly with the age of seamless ecosystems, like you have your Google account is attached to so many different programs, and I'm guilty of this. If somebody asks me to sign in, I can sign in with my Google account or my Apple account. I'll do that because I don't want to be remembering passwords. But and guests expect that kind of interaction to feel very connected, but it can feel it's just about how much data we have on them, and so it's responsible and transparency, and that's how we apply it. So as I said, they do want that level of personalization. They're acclimatized to that now. What used to feel like luxury is now kind of baseline, but we have to be very careful. We find that it's not just a data mining exercise for that. It has to feel personalized for the right reasons, and it can break the trust with the guest very, very quickly.
Do you have guests that are I suppose unwilling to share data is not the right way to?
Well, yeah, I mean, we can see that straight away. I mean, we look at, even our most basic tool for getting guest data as a whole, look at, something like Google, GA4, and we try to find out, even the age demographics or, where they come from. And you can see now just the amount of people that are opting out of taking cookies. And that becomes very, very, very difficult for us. And it's good to say with that, even that level of data, we can draw inferences that hotels that see a high level of people opting out of saying taking cookies, they tend to have a younger demographic in there. It almost tells its own story without us having to mine the data. So yeah, it is tricky, yeah.
I think that that if you are guaranteed a more personalized experience, I'm a believer that guests would be more than willing to hand over certain aspects of their data. And to your point of luxury, Christopher, I think true luxury now is all about having options and having the options to maybe opt in, opt out, subscribe to this, unsubscribe to that. And even when it comes to the hotel experience, choosing whether you want the human interaction or do you want a blended experience or a tech only experience. I'm going to bring Frank into the conversation here because Christopher's raised a really good point about the data mining aspect of having so much and maybe not entirely sure knowing where to start or what to do with it. Frank, what are you seeing in the tech space that's making it easier for hoteliers to turn that raw data into actionable insights?
Yeah, no, and I agree, on one sense that if you're just capturing data to capture data, then there's really no value there. But there's no such thing as having too much data. It's really about how you convert that data into information, right? Into things that are actionable, things that will truly personalize the experience. And you touched a little bit on data privacy as well. And the paradox of that is that if a guest gives you a preference, tells you that I want you to know this about me, and then you don't do anything with it, you've actually not met the expectation of the guest. If they say I want to opt out, you have to honor that. But if they tell you I'd like you to know this, this, and this about me, it's almost your obligation to try to deliver that personalized experience. So that's really the paradox between privacy and data. But I think in this AI age, we have the opportunity to use the data in a way, especially when it's organized and structured in a way that you can action it I think is truly important. And it's really about creating an end-to-end guest experience ecosystem so that, the challenge we've had as an industry is data has been so siloed. You've captured all this data in the PMS, you capture all this data in your food and beverage system, in your spa system, in your golf system. And it's kind of trapped in those silos. And the interfaces between most of those different systems typically are just sort of a posting interface, right? I'll post a charge to my room, but really gives you very little insight about that guest. There are probably two separate profiles stored in two separate systems. So I think it's about being able to organize the data in a way. A good example is how you can use actionable insights. If I have a PMS and now that PMS can actually access the entire guest itinerary, then when I'm sending out a pre-arrival email, I might look at what they have or haven't booked yet and put dynamic content in the pre-arrival for all guests that are arriving in 7 days. I'm going to promote to certain guests that haven't booked spa yet. I'm going to promote our spa treatments and book this in advance. To a guest that hasn't booked dining, I might promote some, the dining reservations. So it's really about creating that dynamic content and promoting things that are good for the business. Maybe you've got low occupancy in some of those areas, so I want to promote those. So it's really about having that data to both, what Dado said in terms of hyper personalizing their experience, and still doing things that will drive more revenue for the business.
Mm-hmm. I want to bring Dado in here because Frank, you raised a point about allowing a greater collaboration across different systems. And I'm keen to hear Dado's thoughts here around ensuring that that data flow across your different systems is accurate and updated in real time. How are you managing that?
Obviously, I mean, I can agree with Frank has said. You need to really kind of spend a lot of effort in making sure that your digital kind of landscape behind everything is very well connected with each other. It can be from the one way to the two way, depends really what kind of the use is of certain system. But what we are trying to do is we are really, and also what Christopher said as well, we are really trying to create a seamless experience because within the hospitality, it's kind of quite common that you are jumping from one system to another. And then it's a kind of up to us to make it as seamless as possible. For example, within Sircle Collection, we have kind of a minimum policy that whatever we do, it must comply with our brand standards at least at 90%, because otherwise that whole trust and you gain at the first moment from the guests, and also what Frank says that when they give you the consent, everything kind of needs to awaken. It really needs to serve that guest at a certain moment. So for us, it's kind of the key in really making sure that our whole digital landscape is properly connected, because your CRM, your PMS, your POS, your CRS, everything needs to be kind of connected with each other. Otherwise, yeah, you would just simply create a disconnect. The same would it be that if someone gave you the preference, I'm a vegan, and then suddenly they come in the room and there's a menu for, hey, there's a happy hour with a great steak on a table in your room. Yeah, that kind of doesn't work. It doesn't hit the nail. And nowadays, what I mentioned is really like people have these kind of high expectations. And yes, we have a lot of data. But again, this data needs to be used kind of it needs to have a purpose, like, because collecting it is important, but yeah, it needs to be used as well. And definitely future-wise, AI is helping with that. But again, that personal touch is also important. So it's a kind of a balance what you need to create over there. And it really depends brand to brand, like how far you want to go digitalizing and how far you want to go like with kind of this hyper personalization. So it needs to be kind of, yeah, we also always say like everything what you see from us online, let's call it like this, is needs to match what you see offline, or even blow your expectations even further, because that's still what makes hospitality great. It's the humans around it.
And I would say that we probably wouldn't be working in the hotel industry if it wasn't a constant challenge of multitasking and juggling different things at once. So it's definitely made for a certain individual. Christopher, as Dado was speaking, then I could see you nodding along. Perhaps it's similar frictions or you know, relating to that experience. You mentioned that you've been looking at places like Google Analytics and G4 to try and identify different aspects of a traveler. Are you able to identify those like extra hidden data points that aren't being captured by your current systems? Or perhaps I can rephrase that. What would you like your current systems to capture that they currently aren't?
Great question. I mean, when we're looking at it like that, Eloise, we I know there's a tech of we take it we almost take a step back from the systems and look at the guest journey and kind of ask ourselves, well, what information do would we like at each stage of that journey? And it's not just one journey. Like there's a journey for every single guest, market segment out. But at what stage would we like, or what information would we like about that guest at that certain time? And it goes back to what we originally talked about. You know, I'll give you information, but I might just, we might just want it as, just to drip feed it in. We're going to a little bit more information now, a little bit more information now. On your second stay, we might want a little bit more information, and so that your personalized stuff. So for us, that friction and what that and Frank have been talking about, for us, it's us taking a step back. It's about looking at the guest journey and at what stages can we get that information. You talk about, almost like what we would call it, like the dark data, is like the notes from the front office. How can we get capture that, and then having that, traditionally that sits on a PMS, but is that the best place for a guest profile to sit? That it's accessible for, your F&B staff or your spa staff. You have to have that. And Frank is probably right up your street, but how do they get access to that data if it sits on a PMS that they don't use? And that's really, really important. And creating, I suppose, the North Star for what we're all trying to get there is that golden customer record going, it's really rich. It's deduplicated. That there's not four Christopher Kennys sitting in your PMS with the same email address. And for us, the way to do that is for us to look at that guest journey and find out what we want at each stage and what system we can plug in, and then having ultimately a central system or somewhere system where we can have that one profile of the guest that is the golden record and that everyone has access to.
Mm-hmm. This blends quite nicely into a question that we've had from the audience, which I'm going to direct to Frank, if I may. The question is, we found that in an average 2-night stay, over 53% of 65 potential sales opportunities are missed at property level. So how does guest intelligence systems help those frontline teams to not just identify, but act on those missed opportunities to drive incremental guest spend? Your thoughts, Frank?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I love what Chris just said, just about that golden guest profile, right? Like with our intelligent guest profile, it actually, on top of all of our applications, we have a single overlay of the guest. So you see the exact same view of the guest, where they've spent property-wide, their preferences, their itinerary, and that will show up in F&B, in the spa, and PMS, all of that. So having that single view of the guest at your fingertips, not just stored in some back-end CRM or marketing system, but actually having it where your staff either have a guest on the phone or a guest in front of them, can act on that data and truly personalize the experience. And with AI now layered on top, you're able to then sort of offer the right guest, the right product at the right time at the right price, right? And that's really the key, having good demand forecasting. So I understand and not just on rooms, but knowing that my spa is at 90%, I'm forecasting that on this day, it's going to be at 90%. So maybe I shrink my menu and only offer my highest margin services, during those times. So I'm driving revenue, but I'm also driving profitability, and I'm offering guests things that I have that I can offer in a profitable way, right? So just having blanket offers, right, without really thinking about the intention and how that something that a guest values I know based on their profile, they would value this, and I can offer it at a cost-effective price, right? Those are things that you start to do more intelligently, and you're not just giving away money, right? And a good example is upgrade pricing for your room. So when you're checking in or that pre-arrival email you get 7 days in advance, when you offer that upgrade, a lot of revenue management systems in the market only work up until the guest makes a reservation. They set the price for the guest to make the reservation, but they don't do anything for upgrades, right? Where now, based on what the guest paid and what the current rates are and other variables, demand that's going on, I need to offer an upgrade price, but that should be changing based on things that are happening in the business. So that's where AI can really help, again, with that demand forecasting and offering, upgrade pricing, and that's very relevant, to the guest, and you're not missing those opportunities, as the question, in the chat said, and you're able to capitalize on things that make sense for the business.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to stick with you for a moment, Frank. You touched on room upgrades. What other maybe routine processes do you see currently where AI can help to automate and drive that ancillary revenue? We saw in our context slides, for instance, that attributes and amenities in terms of the importance, F&B or on-property dining was the way that the price deals and discounts work was more important when it was in the realm or field of F&B and on-property dining. So what other routine processes do you see that AI can support?
Well, I think the research that you presented at the beginning is interesting, right? Because a lot of guests are maybe speaking from the perspective of a digital experience that they've seen before at a hotel, and they're not that impressed with it. They'd rather deal with the human because the digital experiences haven't gone up to par. So I think we need to rethink how we can take away some of the menial tasks from a staff and allow an app. So not the apps that have kind of over the past 10 years have been in hospitality, which are really just mobile brochures. But I would say introducing technology where like a mobile app that allows a guest to check in on their phone, fill in their reg card so they don't have to do that, when they arrive. You now have richer data. They can check in on their phone, they can get a digital key, or they can go to the desk. It's all about choice. Technology is not one or the other. It's about how do you accomplish both, but really freeing up your staff to be better hosts, right? So that now guests can book all their everything on their itinerary directly themselves on their phone. I can book a spa treatment, a dinner reservation, a golf tee time, what have you, a cooking class. But also being able to do in-stay notifications, right? So if now through AI, I'm detecting I have some extra inventory available in my spa, maybe I'm offering certain guests, especially ones that would value spa services, maybe I'm offering them a discount, or maybe dinner in the hotel, in the restaurant that seems very light for occupancy today, right? So just doing things that you're using the information that you have and making decisions in real time, and using the underlying technology to do so, I think is critically important.
Dado, in your role, and I'm sort of like leaning on your digital customer experience role here, how are you deciding if automating, where are you going to automate versus what should remain that human-driven experience?
Well, within our company, so I'm also kind of famous for keep pushing on that. So when we are picking up on automation, then we always think about, okay, for who is it, right? So you always have, I'm always extremely curious. Obviously, we need to collect as much data as possible from people who already booked with us, but often it's very much neglected within the hotels. And I get to have this discussion constantly. For example, when hotel says, well, I had 50,000 guests past year. And then I say, okay, what is the average occupancy? How many people stayed and blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, yeah, it was always two people in a room. And then I say, okay, so it probably had around 20,000 ghosts within your hotel, but you don't know nothing about it. So when we talk about automation, then we always spend a lot of time like, how can we, the people who are sharing the room with other people, bring them closer to the people who already know? And then these people who do we know, how we make sure we serve them the best. So for example, the perfect thing for automation is that, yeah, obviously sending the pre-arrival email with upsells or post-stay messages, ask them how was their stay. But when it within our companies, definitely when it comes kind of, let's say, a honeymoon request or whatever, then it's really kind of, okay, let's step back and then really, this is not something a chatbot can do it. It really needs to be a person making them feel special, because nowadays people as well can really kind of almost sense it, where it's kind of a robot talking to them versus where is a person literally behind of it. So as I want to say, like automation can handle the volume, and I totally agree with Frank that that is kind of freeing the time of our staff to really kind of make time to focus on a high value service and creating these memorable moments for all these people who are really kind of having different kind of requests. So this kind of balance efficiency, and then also not losing that personal touch, which is actually the whole hospitality is built on. And that is a kind of very, very important element for us. So as I said, and I totally agree also with Christopher, like taking a step back, kind of not just being focusing, okay, what I already know, but kind of seeing it from a different angle, like what do we really want to know? Who are all these other people, and checking the segments and everything. So yeah, you can put a lot of automation in place, but then a goal must be very clear where it needs to head to.
Mm-hmm. Christopher, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this around, what you're deciding to automate versus what should remain, I suppose, human driven. How are you deciding?
Yeah, it probably goes back to my point previously, and leaning on what Frank and Dado said. It's really how do we use that automation piece to become better hosts.
Mm.
So traditionally, we would have had, in every hotel, purely transactional conversations at check-in. Somebody arrives, they ask you, what's your name, when is your check-in date, when are you leaving, they ask you for your credit card, and that, 4 minutes later, they're gone. But if you can automate that process, as Frank had said, if they can have themselves pre-checked in, when they do arrive, the next conversation, it's about their stay, it's about what interests them, it's about, do you need a recommendation for a restaurant tonight? Do you need me to order a taxi? Do you need a taxi to the airport tomorrow? What do you need? How can I make your stay better? And you become a great host, and that's ultimately why we're all in this business, because we want to be hosts. And so it's it's how we can automate those maybe colder parts, the impersonal parts. And if you can do them really well, I find through technology, it's an enhancer to the service that you provided. A really good check. I mean, and I work like same as Dave and Frank. I work in technology, and I still get a buzz when something, when two systems talk to each other, and the outcome is exactly as I would expect it. I get a buzz out of that, and I go, that's really cool. It's really enhanced my stay. And so I think that's the decision we're making. And as we
Mm.
go along, we have other issues that in this industry, like labor shortages and skill shortages. That's going to drive a level of automation as well.
Mm-hmm.
Whether we like it or not. And we're used to, when I still expect to be able to call, say, my bank and speak to somebody, but I don't. When I call my bank now, I speak to an AI agent for 99% of the time, and it's that final 1% I might have to talk to somebody.
Mm.
And I think people will just become accustomed to it. But I think it's when you're implementing that automation, how does it impact? And always thinking, how does it impact the guest journey? And is this so good that, is it a 9 out of 10? Is this really enhancing the guests stay with us? I think that's what's really important.
I think when you get it right from a delivery perspective in terms
Yeah.
of enhancing the guest experience, there's going to be a more propensity or incentive to spend.
Yeah.
Because they're there. I mean, you're in a great mood, so why wouldn't you just say like, yeah, a bottle of champagne, why
This
not?
is so
Whatever it might be.
exactly. This is so easy. It's so easy for me to order a bottle of champagne, and we talk about that ecosystem, and it's so easy for me to order a bottle of champagne. For my payment details are already on my phone. This is too easy, too easy. And why do we spend so much with Amazon? It's just so easy, so easy.
Staying with you, Christopher, you mentioned you've just touched on labour shortages, which is still gripping hospitality in its broadest sense. I think globally as well. Um, what practical steps do you think will help the likes of, your departments such as marketing and
Yeah.
communications with revenue, with operations, better collaborate on those commercial opportunities?
Yeah, Eloise, I think this is a struggle we've all had, and I think traditionally in hotels in past, but it is definitely changing where you would have had, every department kind of operated in a silo. They didn't talk to each other. They all had their own information. Everyone's very protective of what they have. So I think the first part is, look, simply breaking down those silos will help you start unlocking opportunities. Revenue, marketing, operations teams, they can't work in isolation. So the commercial opportunity for the upsells or the package and enhancing guest experiences only comes when these type of teams work close together to understand the customer and align what's practical to do. Like, we could all have these great ideas about how we're going to personalize Frank's day or Dado's day or Eloise's day. And then, your front office team going like, that's Chris, that's mental. That's not going to work. You're not going to be able to get that across. So I think, breaking down those silos, having cross-functional teams, holding regular discussions about the challenges and the ideas and fleshing them out so that everyone's on the same page about the ultimate goal about. And I think, Frank, you said it, and Dev said it, what's the ultimate goal, and that they're all aligned on that, and they're all trying to work to get to that stage. And again, ultimately they can then see the benefit of centralizing your guest data, using stuff that's shared around, so that when somebody does arrive at the spot, they know that it's their birthday, and they end up at the restaurant and they know that it's their birthday, and or they're celebrating a special occasion. That's what people want. That's ultimately, when you break down those silos, I think that's the real important part.
Mm. Frank, I'd like to bring you in here, to almost comment on the same topic, but from a tech perspective. So how can technology actually support that alignment between departments without having to completely overhaul or force what I would describe as maybe organizational change?
Yeah, I mean, I love what Chris said earlier, which is take a step back and look at your end-to-end guest journey, right? And that's really how you connect the journey end to end is really what's going to become important, right? And so, like in the video, we only played about half the video at the beginning, but really was about a new technology we're calling Spend, and it's about packaging. So when you think of all of the things you offer in today's hotel world, the 99% of packages that go beyond just a head and bed reservation is maybe a European plan, or, bed and breakfast, will include breakfast with your rate. But when you think about all the things that your particular hotel has to offer, right, being able to create packages that can now be fulfilled online. So Spend is about, it actually stands for Stay Package Entitlements, New Dynamic Booking. And so it's not just the ability to book all the different things a la carte in your hotel, but actually putting them into packages, and then the system can prompt you for all your entitlements. You get a spa service every day, one of these 5 services. You can play our championship course once during your stay, and then our other courses during your other nights. And then you can book at one of 3 of 5 restaurants, whatever it might be, but being able to do those packages. And what AI will do now is also offer you, based on you prefer your tea times in the morning and spa services in the afternoon and dinner around 8 o'clock, it will start to create packages like the actual entitlements booked underneath the package offering, which today, to Chris's point, with labor shortages, this is where technology can really help, right? Is the ability not to have somebody sit on the phone to book that package. And it's why hotels don't offer a lot of packages online, because it's the complexity for a guest to book all of their entitlements. And then if you can't fulfill that entitlement, you're letting down the guest. So the ability to automate and be able to offer that and have maybe AI provide a few different options of itineraries based on your package, I think that's where you can really start to see that merchandising your offerings in a different way, and making sure that if the underlying inventory is not there, if we have a tournament going on and our championship course is not available, or if I no longer have those services in the spa, that package online shouldn't be offered, right? So the ability to dynamically remove packages from being able to be booked based on the underlying inventory that all those entitlements are based on. So, it's sort of a real shift for the industry because, again, the whole thing around automation, like we're dealing with an Uber generation. To Dado's point earlier about, um, you know, COVID, that consumers were trained on ordering food service to their home, or now ordering their Uber. They don't no longer want to call the taxi company or line up at the bank. To Chris's point, right? They're actually expecting a certain level of technology to access their experience. Not every guest is going to want to do that. Again, you have to give them choice. But when you do, and they say, well, it's a lot easier for me to just do this myself right in this app, I can maybe make a room request for more towels. And now I can see that someone in housekeeping has picked up my request. The towels are on their way. So I have that level of control that I do with Uber, where I'm not calling the taxi company and after 20 minutes having to call them back to say, where's the cab? I'm now able to see I ordered the Uber and it's on its way. That same level of automation, that same expectation is what guests are coming into your hotels with. And we have to meet that expectation. It helps us and helps with some of our labor problem, but it also helps the guest and creates a better guest experience for them based on how they like to be served.
Mm-hmm.
Frank, would you think, like, something we're looking at is using that AI? We're looking at the transactional point of view, but it's, Frank has stayed with us 5 times. Well, rather than selling the upside, we need to give it to Frank rather than selling it, because his lifetime value is far greater than just that once off. And go back to your point, Chris likes to play golf. But the golf course is nearly booked out. We better get in contact with him, because if he comes here this time and can't play golf, his stay and his experience are going to be diminished, and we might lose him as a customer long term.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Frank, staying with you for a moment here, just as you were talking about the spend product, does this question from the audience, does Agilysys, be it the product or the company, provide that data regarding customer experiences using amenities, and how rich is that data?
Yeah, I mean, we have the full view of the guest, right? So we know that this guest, typically if you're going to offer, again, let's say you're doing a marketing campaign and you want to offer the third night free of a 3-day stay, right? You don't want to just offer it to everyone, right? A spray and pray campaign where you just make that offer. And now you're going to get guests that are looking for a cheap offer, are going to fill your hotel room, but they're not going to spend any money in the hotel. I'd rather target the guests that when they stay with us for 2 or more nights, they typically have a bottle of over 75 pounds. They will have at least 2 spa services. Will buy retail. We'll do all of these things and utilize. So I'd rather target guests that I know will spend more in my outlets than just fill a head in bed, right? And so I think it's more about that intentional kind of marketing that you'll be able to do post-stay, right? These are a lot of the technologies I talked about are during booking or during in-stay opportunities, which are important, which I think we miss out on. And but it's also the ability to market to that guest in a much more targeted way.
Mm-hmm. And to blend in another question from the audience, around having, do we have any data regarding how hotel cosmetics or amenities impact the guest experience? I was at an event once, and it was the founder of a female sustainable swimwear brand, and she had partnered with a luxury boutique hotel. So she had her normal retail units, I suppose, on the high street, but also hotel partnerships. And the revenue that this brand made via the partnership with hotel was far more than the traditional retail units. And it's because the founder mentioned that she was capturing mainly women at a point of intent. They were on their holiday mode. They were happy and willing to spend. And I think that's what we've been talking about today, and I hope somewhat answers the question that we came in from the audience.
Yeah, no, and I think, you know, what they've purchased, like for example, when you're looking at your availability in the spa, by shrinking your menu, you might shrink it to also look at what treatments typically produce more retail spend, right? So like a facial versus a wax treatment. Well, with a facial, the guest wants to purchase the products you might have used on their face, right? And to your point, they might buy additional retail. So having those opportunities at the right moment where somebody could purchase a nice beach bag, you know, right in the shop of the spa or what have you, I think are retail opportunities that that you're right. You've got a captive audience. They're not there in a huge, you know, store where there's lots of choice, right? They've got narrow choice, and if you can present the right product at the right time, you know, you can obviously satisfy the guest as well as you know, drive more revenue.
It speaks to the idea that perhaps these, you know, with the tech become more intuitive and more allowing more functions. The idea that perhaps these partnerships will also exist in an external partnership, as opposed to maybe just looking at your spa, golf, or on property dining. Dado, I want to come to you for a moment. It's great that we've talked about so many different initiatives and different ways that we can use this guest intelligence to drive spend, but I'm curious to learn about actually measuring success of these campaigns. How are you looking at those KPIs or key metrics when it comes to driving that incremental spend?
I guess intelligence, obviously, you need to look at both, right? Revenue and guest experience, right? Because sometimes when you want to achieve a very high revenue by chasing a higher RevPARs or ADRs, then you can definitely damage the guest experience at the end if it's not kind of appealing to them by getting the bad reviews. So the ancillary revenue, the upsell conversions, the guest satisfaction should all kind of move together. And the bigger win is that when intelligence is not just showing you an insight, but when it's kind of creating a measurable revenue and a happier guest. So we monitor this through, as I said, I was very happy what Christopher mentioned about cross-departmental kind of collaboration, because without it, like the whole guest intelligence doesn't work. So what we have is kind of shared KPI dashboards where operations are involved, the marketing is involved, e-commerce, revenue, sales. And these are the kind of the KPIs which are kind of driving our company over there, with kind of solid pillars, which we need to kind of be capable of staying a standalone established hotel group, and then kind of being the boss over our own future. So yes, to answer your question, we do have shared KPIs. Of course, the KPIs per department, but also the shared KPIs and lots of projects involved with how can we achieve that to kind of really make it all happen.
Mm-hmm. I can see that we really don't have a lot of time on the clock left, so I'm going to ask you each the same question in turn, just to round off our discussion today. And it's looking at emerging opportunities to perhaps apply and operationalize this guest data to truly drive measurable revenue growth. What would be your advice or tip for a hotelier to focus on? Either maybe something that's current now and in existence, or if you really want to go a bit of blue sky thinking, maybe something that's yet to be developed or an opportunity in the future. Dado, let's begin with you. What opportunities do you think hoteliers should be focusing on to drive that spend?
Well, for us in general, it's kind of whatever we do, we are kind of chasing our wishful audiences and then searching kind of the lookalikes of those people as well, obviously to get bets in heads, how Frank has said it as well. And for us, it's really kind of offer, as I've mentioned a couple of times, really offering that personal, that the offers feel personal for them, and it's kind of aligning with the kind of lifestyle of that audience it has. So my advice would be same like how I have advice for my team and also within our companies, that always start small, test, measure, scale up, because we all love technology, but if you're gonna test it a lot in the beginning, you don't need a perfect kind of tech stack to kind of drive all this, but you just need the better way, the smarter way how you use the data which you already have. So the bottom line is what we do a lot is really testing a lot, scaling, measuring, go back to the drawing table, kind of never give up, just to kind of find that perfect sweet spot which we are looking for.
Mm-hmm. Christopher, what are your thoughts? What emerging opportunities do you think hotels should prioritize?
Yeah, I think where we would start, or where we've started, is look at your North Star. Where do you want to be?
Mm.
Map out that guest journey, as I've probably overemphasized, and then just look at each step. Look at the independent systems that you have. Try to get them to work together so that you can start to build up a complete profile of that guest, and also not just the guest individually, but of each market segment in themselves, understanding both that lifetime value and the true cost of each booking. Whether you're turning down bookings, the true cost of what's coming in. I think then couple that with your AI and your automation, you can really start to deliver a personalized journey, and drive up sales, and make every interaction count. I would say, you know, it is a step-by-step process, and that North Star keeps moving. It doesn't stay stationary, but it is a step-by-step process. And don't be frustrated by, I want to get to there tomorrow. We all do, but it takes time, and it can take a cultural change. So as I said, it's about using data smartly and anticipating those guest needs. But I said, just understand your North Star and how your systems can help you get there.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Christopher.
No problem.
Frank, your final words, please.
Well, I mean, I think the AI age is about data, and what Dado said earlier. I love the thing about just focusing on the guest that booked the reservation. So we have to move as an industry from being room centric to being guest centric, and one of those things is even a unit of measure. Like, I think the fact that we're so myopic on RevPAR versus revenue per guest, I think is a starting point, right? If we start to focus on the right things, and use guest-centric technology, this will help hoteliers really unlock the power of AI and the potential for personalization at scale, and making those optimal decisions that's going to, in real time, that's going to drive better revenue and profit, right? So I think ultimately it's about structuring your data in a way that's actionable, and some of that just goes back to rethinking what you're measuring, and also how your systems are connected, right?
Mm.
And to Chris's point, what's your overall guest journey, and what's the optimal guest, as Dado said, what is that guest profile that you're trying to target for your hotel, that demographic, right?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you all for your time and insights. I'm sure we could have carried on a lot more or a lot further. I'll flag here that we will keep the webinar open right at the end, just so that our audience members can follow up on any of the links that we've popped into the chat today, including the LinkedIn profiles of all our speakers, alongside further details about Agilysys, including the company's website and LinkedIn page. So do get in touch, do follow up, do carry on this conversation. Before I say a final goodbye, I just have some closing slides that I would like to run through. And we're actually going to be using a bit of AI automation ourselves in the form of a live transcript. Our next webinar is going to be hosted in Italian. And we are going to be looking at how Italian hotels, but also hotels generally, can maximize revenue and efficiency with smarter payments. There will be an English transcript live on that webinar, and every registrant will receive a copy of that English transcript. And we would absolutely love to see you there. You can sign up at no cost by clicking on the link into the chat. We've talked a lot today about AI and technology, and it's important for us. We're all early on these journeys. We all know what our North Star is. We know where we want to achieve. It's how do we get there? So we are bringing a networking group together for anybody working within the industry to share thoughts, insights, experiences around their AI or digital transformation. We call it networking with a purpose, highlighting that intent. We're going to have 4 roundtable discussions at this networking, covering things such as personalization, operations, marketing, etc. Again, just to collaborate and just to spark that conversation and keep that conversation flowing. So the links to register for that event have been popped into the chat. And if you're interested in working with us, either across our digital events or in person, do get in touch with my colleague Katie. Her details are up on your screen, also in the chat. And all that's left for me to do today is to say thank you. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you, Christopher, Frank, and Dado. Thank you so much to Agilysys. We will include the Agilysys video in the follow-up tomorrow. Wishing you all a good rest of the day, and we will see you all very soon. So take care, everyone. Bye now.
Good night, guys.
Take care. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Frank.
Thanks, Chris.
Talk to you soon.